So we are going to have a whisk through these markets. Very lucky to have Julia here from BONARD to give us a 15-minute presentation, picking up the markets. We've got a super panel coming after that, and we're going to cover a lot of the market. So if you've got questions, please do give them. And thanks very much to everybody in the room for being here, but also thank you to everybody online. Look forward to your questions, but now, because we can, we're going to give a big round of applause to Julia.
Thank you so much, Richard. I hope you hear me well. It's very nice to see you all here and welcome you to the intro for the student housing. Hopefully it will lay out the fruitful ground for our follow-up panel. I've prepared for you 7 topics today for student housing. So we will look at the demand for the sector, the current supply that is there, future developments for the supply, some rents, portfolios, yields, and transactions. Maybe a bit about us. So BONARD is an advisory and a research company, over 15 years of experience in the rented residential sector. We've monitored over 1,000 unique sources, which our analysts are processing over time. We have a global presence in covering rented residential markets across Europe, but also in Canada, in Australia, in Latin America, and a bit of Asia. We have now a team of over 80 people that are located in Europe and China. Our database encompasses over 2 million student beds, 300,000 beds that will come to the market, and those are across 265 city markets. So let's dig into the content. These are the clients, but also the major investors and players in the sector already involved. Hopefully, after the presentation and the panel, you will also be in the student housing space. It's as challenging for the sector as for any other ones, but I hope to tell you a story to show you how beneficial and high-yielding the sector can be. So let's kick in. Student housing is the most preferred asset class when we talk about asset classes with scale. You see on the screen the PVC prospective sector ranking. Over time, student housing bumped up to the top and now is holding the 4th. We will be awaiting for the next year's ranking to come and see how the sector developed. But definitely among those non-traditional, they still call that, alternative asset classes, student is much more scalable than, for example, data center markets. Well, looking specifically at last year, as I briefly mentioned, the sector was going over the turbulences typical for other major markets, as well as some alternative ones. The inflation was high, the construction cost rose, as well as the cost of financing was high. However, student was not affected as strongly as other asset classes. You can see it in the stable occupancy performances across several markets. Increasing rent, we'll also look at that a bit later, but also demand from the capital that is ready to get into students much sooner than to other asset classes, but all in due time. It's been still quite slow this year. This is on the screen is a demand overview for you. Student population is growing across major markets. You can see on the screen France, Spain, the UK. In some markets, domestic population, like in Germany, which may be interesting for us today, is rather flat, but international student population is still growing. This is the selection of only foreign student population for you. The growth is much more considerable. You see how the student population in France changed over the last 6 years. Plus 18%, even more stronger increase in Germany. And the Dutch student population for foreign students has been growing considerably. Actually, maybe we can focus on the Netherlands here for a bit, because The growth was really strong, while the market started to maybe limit the increase of English taught programs and rather promote introduction of Dutch-only courses. This is a topic that I wanted to pick up with you as well while on demand. It's been a discussion for us as a research company where those student limitations and student caps are going, because it's over the last 12 months, 16 months, a discussion for us. Several destinations like the Netherlands or Canada or Australia already introduced student caps. They're trying to limit the influx of international students, changing the post-study work rights. We believe that still this is a development that would be temporary. Long term, it would be really hard to limit the mobility of students. And students bring definitely value to the destination, especially international students with the economic benefits. So what is there to satisfy the student demand? The supply of student housing is still limited. We, of course, see the most stock in the strongest student markets, this being London, Paris, the other UK developed markets, but still strong student cities like Madrid or Rome keep being overlooked. We compare the supply for the market on the provision rate metric, so that's what you see on the screen. That's a relationship of all the student beds purposely built for students and the students in the market. In this case, we picked the whole population, all the students per city or the country. So you see rather small markets on the very top, but still there is Rome as a strong student city, Lisbon and Valencia there, and the development in those markets haven't changed over the last 2 years. So the supply that is coming up to the market is not able to keep up with the growing demand. For example, for Rome, now this relationship of beds to students is almost 4%. When we look at Rome in 2026, with the developments that are there announced and what the student population will be, this provision rate will change just slightly by 1 percentage point. It will be just over 4%. This is new developments to come. Again, no surprise that biggest, most scalable markets, London, Manchester, Paris, are on the top of the screen. We still have opportunistic markets that got to the kind of top 20, this being Vancouver or Milan, that we talked about just Rome. There are still growing interest to develop there, and you can see it's in the number of assets and the number of beds coming up. On the right with the map, it's those student beds that opened in 2024. We still see rather constant delivery of beds year on year. We usually monitor for 24 in this case, and for the year back it was around 60,000 beds per year that would come and enter the market. Of course, the current economic situation is influencing development, but those numbers will probably still kick in. Maybe some of the developments that were concluded before are in these numbers, and we'll see a bit of a drop later on. The rent levels, so what is there that the student product is asking for the offer. We have compared here only private student housing offer for a studio. So this is where your bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom are private. And these are only private PBSA providers. We see over the last 2 years that the rents are growing. In 2024 compared to 23 at a bit slower pace, but it definitely outperforms the pre-COVID times. The operators are able to increase rents over inflation to compensate for the growing costs that they have for the operations. Here we're looking at the stock that is operational but also formed in a portfolio. What we mean by that is it's a set of 2 residences or more, either in standing schemes or those that are under development, and they are run by one operator, a portfolio. These are only private bets in Europe, so you see there are over 350 portfolios like that. Of course, none of them are for sale. Some are, more hopefully to come in maybe 2025. We're also here from the panel today, but this is the stock that is ready to be transacted. This is private bets. In the case of, for example, last year, the number of portfolio grew by 15% when we talk about the number. And we see this year already an increase as well in small, low-digit numbers. The players that are there, not ready to sell yet, been consolidating, growing their portfolios, adding to the market. In Europe, those operators, investors who have over 10,000 bets, so the kind of major scale portfolios, are expanding. The trend is similar to the more mature market like UK, where the market is consolidating and growing. Here we got the yields. So please note that this information we source from our brokers, partners. Thank you so much for sharing this. We see that the situation was for the expansion of the yield over the last 2 years. The expansion wasn't as considerable as in office. That's really worth to say. But of course, the sector wasn't immune to the shocks of the economy that we have over the last 2 years. One of the last topics that we'll cover today, and we'll get right to the panel, transactions. For the 2024, to consolidate the whole activity over the year, we will do a count in December. For now, important to mention that the activity has been slow for last and this year as well. We went from 90 transactions in 2022 to actually 50 in 2023, and now we see 39 that were announced and out there, and we are still 1 quarter left in the year, so we'll see how that number will change. But we'd expect similar level of transaction from previous years. On the screen, I've put the 3 biggest deals, so you can see that some activity has been going on. It's not all that negative, and hope it will pick up in the next year. For the sentiment, there's been a shift after summer, especially, where the investments are more positive to go and deploy, but probably in the new year. I was sharing with you a sneak peek of the platform that we have. So our student data is now at an interactive platform. We'll be happy to share with you a demo and to explain more how it works. We have several colleagues here today, also from BONARD. Feel free to reach out. That's us, and I think we can move to the panel.
Good. Let's start with some quick introductions. Julia, maybe for those who don't know BONARD, just for 30 seconds, who are you, what do you do, and we will work our way along. Julia, start with you.
Okay, just for those who didn't hear, we are a research and advisory company. So we do data for rented residential sectors, be it student, BTR, co-living, micro-living, all rented residential.
Great. Over to you, Christian.
Yeah, thank you. We are an investment manager and shareholder in different operators in the micro-living segment and are active in the German market.
Marek, over to you.
So I'm with Griffin Capital Partners. We are an asset manager based in Poland. We have started and grew the first scalable PBSA platform in the country called Student Depot. And we are now developing student space jointly with Signal Capital and Echo Investment.
Sandra, over to you.
Yeah, so my name is Sander Verseput, co-founder of Chainels. I started a PropTech company 12 years ago. Background in real estate and housing management at TU Delft. And what we basically provide is a tenant experience platform for residential, office, retail, and mixed-use properties across Europe.
Super. Christof.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Christof. I'm with MILESTONE. MILESTONE is mostly known in Europe as a student housing operator. We currently manage around 5,000 beds across 5 countries. We are an independent operator. That means we are not tied to any capital. And I'm happy to provide the operational perspective to this panel.
Great. And can I just check, can everybody hear? Because I know there's quite a lot of noise. Is the sound okay for everybody? Not for you, then come on in. Don't be shy. Right, let's first of all start off. I mean, we've got an interesting perspective here in terms of both the investor side, the operator side. So very interesting to get the views. Let's start maybe with you, Christof, just in terms of the trends. What are you seeing? What has changed?
I mean, if you look, because the panel is called student housing and micro living, right? I mean, one thing that's really becoming more obvious in student housing is that this is really now an institutional product, right? Just the other week I was at a co-living conference, and if you compare the co-living scene with the student housing scene, what you realize is that with student housing you have just such an institutional product. With co-living, it's still a very, almost like a startup scene where you still miss almost the scalability and the investment. With student housing, I think this, now coming from the UK, of course, has become a truly institutional product across whole Europe.
Okay, Marek and Christian, it'd be interesting to get your perspective from the investment standpoint. We've seen from Julia there some of the changes that we've seen in the market. What's your take on it in terms of, I suppose, where were we a year ago? Where are we now?
Well, I think all developers in the market right now are really struggling. So we don't have any new product, and I think I remember when I was here on stage last year, or even a couple of years ago at MIPIM, we were always saying the investment market is struggling because we had no product because the prices were so high. Now the prices have come down, at least for the land, which is transacting. But now you don't have any developers left that are able to execute because they are struggling with a lack of equity, like on a large scale. Yes, there are developers left, but if you're looking at the investment landscape, again, product is missing. I think we're going to cover it later a bit, what we're going to see maybe in the German market on the transaction side. I think there are going to be some interesting developments next year. Lots of capital is moving into the market, but right now there aren't so many transactions happening. But that's in the entire market. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And Marek, obviously you're operating in CE in Poland. I suppose what's your sense of where the market is at the moment? Are you seeing more activity? Is there more of a growth there?
We see new investors entering the market pretty much all the time this year. That's correct both for BBSA and PRS. So there seems to be a pretty good sentiment in terms of willingness to accumulate product and address this low provision rate. Liquidity-wise, as we all know, there have been no major transactions just yet, but the belief that the cost of capital will eventually come down seems to be strengthening. I mean, for a year and a half now, the outlook for the WIBOR cost of financing, I'm talking for Poland only, has been positive in a sense that the curve has been downward shifting. So people are willing to invest, they are willing to grow their platforms, but it's not the time for exits just yet. For this, we need to wait 2 or 3 years now.
Okay, good. Christof, it'd be interesting to get your view. Do you expect to see more transactions next year? I guess, how are you seeing the market developing?
Well, the one thing I want to differentiate here, though, is, of course, we try to have an overall view on student housing in Europe, but since we manage properties in 5 countries, trying to enter 3 countries at the moment, you have to differentiate between the markets. I think you made a really good point regarding Poland. There's almost like a FOMO situation now happening in Poland a little bit, where you see really an increase also of local interest in the student housing asset class. then there's other markets where the numbers just don't add up just yet. So now making a statement across Europe, like where do I see transactions? Of course, everyone is interested in student housing. In reality, though, the last few years, everyone has been interested in student housing. From our experience, investors are still very picky. They're very selective. Eventually, of course, they need to invest, but I feel like similar sentiment was also already last year. So let's see. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to return to that, but I wanted to pick up a little bit in terms of what students are looking for. And Sander, maybe your view on that would be interesting in terms of how you're seeing the demand, what amenities people are looking for. I guess, what are you seeing that's needed that will help the investors on the real estate side, I suppose, in terms of the amenities?
Yeah. If we look at the current student population, they're all Gen Z, so they grew up with smartphones, social media, so they're almost continuously online. 45% is almost all the time connected to the internet. So also their preferences have changed over time. So remote learning is really popular. So students, especially from abroad, looking for more flexibility in their rental contracts. And also students are now really used to everything as a subscription. That's also what we see among our clients. So they're used to, for example, having a subscription on a bike. They even prefer to pay more instead of buying something if the upfront investment is smaller. So that, on the other hand, provides opportunities for investors to start with additional revenue models, not only providing space, but also lots of services.
Okay, good. And from your side, Julia, I guess, what are you seeing in terms of some of the research you're doing, in terms of the demand side, what students are looking for?
Yeah, definitely. They've in some markets where the student product is more diverse, they've already seen it, they've tried it, so they are demanding. They would like to see nice amenities, and that's differentiate maybe a 4-star from a 3-star, where the market is already there. They have different tiers of the product. When they would choose accommodation, I think it's still the same, location, and the cost. 2 points that are always on the top of the list in any student market that we survey. I don't think that will change in any time soon. Affordability, probably we'll talk about that today as well, is a big topic for the market.
Okay, good. And maybe for the investors, it would be interesting just to get a sense of what's happening in terms of the capital flows. Are we seeing more capital coming into this to match what appears to be an interesting demand side? If we're looking at the fundamentals of it, is there capital coming in to match that? What's your sense of that, Marek or Christof? Christian?
Well, the capital is there, or the capital is standing on the sideline, ready to at least commit to new deals, but the deals are not really there yet. I think what capital is looking for right now is also standing assets, because it's always nice if you talk to the PE investors of London and the US saying, okay, what are you looking for? They like to have cash flow quite fast, and it's easier if you have some initial portfolio that can be then developed in something more with additional pipeline assets than if you just have an idea. So yes, we're going to see more developments in the next 24 months, I'd say. If that's going to really come on a decent level with the demand, I don't think so. So if the market is going to be functional again, we're going to see many new projects, many new developments coming up.
Again, I'm interested. We just had the living panel, obviously, and there has been a huge focus on living, and I'm wondering whether that has then begun to introduce people to student housing, whereas before it might have been, I'm focused on student housing, but now because we've got such a big focus on living, people are then beginning to go, okay, well, I'm looking at BTR, build to rent, but also I can see here that there's micro-living, co-living, student housing, senior if we take out the healthcare aspects of it. So is that attracting more people to it? I mean, Marek and Christof, it'd be good to get your views on that.
Well, I have to say that the investors, the people with whom we are cooperating, to whom we are talking to, they tend to draw a pretty strong distinction between the two asset classes. So student housing is somewhat separated from PRS, and I would say the demand is quite strong in both fields. But these two asset classes, at least in our geography, don't seem to be mixed over.
But maybe just to add here, because I think one thing that's, from our perspective, what we realize, we talked to a lot of different capital partners, because that's just our business. And based on the questions that we get raised, what we're realizing is, let's say over the last 10, 15 years, when you look at ESG, the E part has been very important. You looked always at the property, does it meet all the ecological criteria, does it meet EU taxonomy and so on. But I feel like this is becoming more of a, I think you had a panel about this as well. It's almost like the bare minimum we can do now. You are sustainable as an investor when it comes to your investments. The shift that we realize, based on the questions we get, is there's definitely now more interest in the S part. And so from this operated real estate, while the S part, of course, is still a social part, is still a very difficult one to measure. With student housing, it's just such an obvious check on the investment box. You know, you look at student housing, yeah, of course it's social. You create a community, you bring people together, you have mental health training of your staff and so on. So this S part of ESG and the investors that need to meet those requirements, we can definitely fill this need at the moment. Yeah.
And Sandra, I'd be interested to pick up on that. Obviously during COVID there was a very big focus, particularly for student housing, the universities on the S, the social side, how you were looking after students, both in terms of health but also well-being. So I suppose, has that influenced the market considerably, and that influence is still there, or is it that there's a bigger focus on the S, as Christof is saying? Where's that headed, Sandra?
Yeah, I think the downside of digitalization and that people are online all the time is that quite a few students, especially if they come from abroad countries, they feel lonely. So they have difficulties making friends. So we see a lot of our clients that are really looking at creating a sense of community in their building. So they have a lot of events, a lot of activities, organizing. They even have a community manager on site. And actually, as a student, if you struggle with your financials or whatsoever, you can even get an appointment with these people. So one of the reasons behind it is, of course, to increase retention, to make sure if people are happy in the place where they live, they will stay longer and they will be happier.
Just one sentence to add here. Sorry about that. Oh, sorry. Because this is such an important point, and you're hitting the nail on the head. What we are looking more into, what we're looking into more and more at Milestone is like, how can we use this technology aspect to almost free up the time of our local staff that we have on site to then focus on the stuff that we feel like we need to focus on, and this is the social aspect, right? So this is where technology actually goes hand in hand of the social aspect and also of the operated building. Yeah.
And I think that technical side, what we're doing in terms of innovation, is a very important driver here as well. Julia, you wanted to pick up a little bit on the S.
Jump in on maybe the new aspect, as it indeed is so. We see that as well, that mental health is huge. I think COVID affected us as a population in general, but students were affected as well. They are now more socially awkward. They don't want to spend time with each other. So it's also the residents' part of work to bring them together. We see now as an offer the mental support class groups where there are even counselors invited for the sessions for the students, which is really important.
Okay, good. Just in terms of some of it was interesting to see the international markets that you put, the European markets. But I guess, Christof, what are you seeing in terms of the more general trends? For example, are we seeing more Chinese students coming again? What's happening in terms of those international flow of students? Are we seeing more English being taught in different parts of which is maybe impacting then on what's happening in the UK. What are you seeing?
Absolutely. I mean, this is really interesting. I mean, we try to make our decisions all based on data and what you. And also, if you believe in student housing, you have to believe in the overall macro trends. And the macro trend is definitely that if you look at the international student population, year on year, it's growing, and it's growing exponentially. And the driving factors there are definitely a growing middle class globally, actually. And if you look where does this middle class grow, it's actually India and China. And then it's kind of funny when you see these statistics, and now all of a sudden the Indian families and the Chinese families can send their kids to Europe to study, and then you look at these statistics, and then you look at our student profile in our German assets, where now already the most popular international student population is Indian and Chinese students. So we see this almost reflected immediately, and so the overall trend is there towards more and more international students. There is an overall trend also for, let's say, European students to gain this international experience. I think when you are a student within the EU, not doing an Erasmus is almost like a no-go nowadays. It feels like, Erasmus has become such an important driver. And there, of course, since we talk about Erasmus, you also see the geopolitical effects now where, for example, Germany and the Netherlands are actually profiteers of Brexit, where previously a lot of those Erasmus students who went to the UK are now staying or going to Germany and the Netherlands. And those are the countries also that have the fastest growing English taught courses. And so this all goes hand in hand, of course, and I think the student housing asset class as such is here to stay for a long time.
Okay, good. And Marek, what is specifically driving, if we look at the CE markets, for example, what are the drivers there? Is it, again, that English as a language is being taught more in the universities? What's the makeup of the students who are coming? How much is international? What's the drivers there?
So international students currently constitute roughly 10% of all the students in Poland. However, this number has been growing with double digits for the last decade or so. This seems to be driven by increasing number of English taught courses. For a lot of people, studying in Poland constitutes an attractive value proposition. You can get a degree in medicine, veterinary studies at a fraction of the cost, and that it is recognized internationally. When you then add the relatively affordable living costs in terms of not only accommodation, studies, but the overall cost of living, this makes up for one of the lowest entry points to studying within the EU, which is once again attractive, as Griffin has already named it, for a lot of Asian students. So this has been one of the drivers, but at the same time we are observing with each passing year that the number of Polish students staying in BBSA is increasing, has been increasing, which corresponds to the fact that the society as a whole is becoming more affluent and more aware of the service. And this is really where I think a lot of attention needs to be put these days to make people aware that BBSA exists and is a valid option for students to stay in.
And Julia, thanks for that, Marek. And Julia, in terms of the investor types, I guess, what are we seeing? Is it, shorter-term capital, longer-term capital? Are you seeing any changes there in terms of the makeup of the investors and the capital looking at the sector?
The makeup is really diverse. We've got core capital looking, core plus, value add. It's another benefit. Those types of capital recognize that it's possible to increase rents in the sector more often than just once per year or once per 5 years. The occupancy for the standing product is still keeping high. So various types of capital are still looking. It's been a shift like this, I think, since, gentlemen, you would know, 3 years back when the institutional capital started to look more and more in the sector, and now they're all in, just waiting for the right moment.
And I'd be interested to get people's views on that rental side, affordability side, and I'd like to declare an interest, which is I have a daughter who's just started university. But I suppose, is that capped in some areas, not capped in others? What's your sense of how because plainly it has to be affordable as well, but there's obviously a drive for greater amenities at the same time. So how do we square that circle?
I mean,
I have an opinion about this because, so as a student housing operator, we get often asked, and I just had this conversation I think an hour ago where we discussed the rent levels in Vienna at the moment, and they are like, who should afford this? But then I say, well, we have now 3 properties and they're all fully leased in Vienna, right? And so when it comes to student housing, and I don't want to come across the wrong way, but when it comes to student housing, there's always the connotation that it needs to be affordable, and of course there needs to be an affordable option. I'm not denying this, but just like nobody is complaining about a Dacia being cheaper than a Mercedes, there's different options in student housing. There is an IBIS budget you can stay in as a hotel, and then there is a Radisson Collection you can stay in as a hotel. So at the end of the day, properties are being filled. And then funny enough, for example, we don't operate properties yet in Italy, but we are well connected to the local operators. What we see there, the most expensive rooms get filled first because the students who come to Italy come with a certain expectation, come with a certain background. So they buy the most expensive rooms first. Then if you look at Poland, where we have now 2,000 beds under management, there we see the cheapest rooms get sold first. So markets are different. You have to, of course, there needs to be a space available for students of all backgrounds, but and I don't want to come across too aggressive here, but I think there is different products for different requirements.
An interesting, actually, that sort of comparison, I think, with the hospitality side.
Yes.
Interestingly, we're getting hospitality and elements of hospitality coming into all the sectors in many ways in terms of office as well. There's around 4 minutes left, I've just been told, which means I've got overexcited and haven't been looking at the time. Has anybody got a question that they wanted to ask, wanted to put to the panel? I'm going to start at this end. My eyes are going to move across, and I got to the end and it's a no. So, last question to me is, I guess, where do we see the market heading? Where are the opportunities or the bigger trends? Because not everybody is an investor here. So what are the key trends? What are the biggest opportunities for anybody looking at the market? Julie, I'll start with you at your end. So that
Sure.
Where is the biggest opportunity? Where should everybody be investing?
Canada is really good. More opportunistic markets like this would be the bet for us. The numbers say that the relationship of bets to students there is quite low. So Italy, Poland, I know that you're all waiting for like specific answers. So I will go there, and my colleagues here will give you a more general outcome.
Or a more specific one, who knows, right? Christian.
I think the largest opportunity for the next 18 months lies within an increased yield compression. So right now we are seeing prices that are reflecting the crisis that we are still having in the market. Nobody really is buying. There are some exemptions, but in general, nothing is really much happening on the transaction market. That is certainly going to change. And if the money returns, we're going to see higher prices, and therefore, if you are ready to buy now, you can make good money in the next years because the prices are just going up.
Okay, good. Marek.
Well, once again, I can only speak for Poland. I think that it is still a good time to enter some of the largest markets within the country, although one needs to be very diligent and cautious when it comes to picking locations. It's not that you can, these days, build your PBSA asset wherever you want and it will definitely stay fully occupied. Those days are long gone.
And Sander, for you, biggest trend?
I think from a PropTech perspective, there are a few opportunities. Typically in student housing, you have a lot of turnover, so people being there for one semester and then going back home. So I think just offering things like a virtual tour, so people from their home in Asia can already sign their rental contract by viewing an asset online. I think that's an opportunity. And then in the subscription business model, as mentioned, students are used to buying subscriptions, especially if they come from a broad country. They just want a plug-and-play house with all their amenities attached to it.
Okay, good. And my sense of the market is that there are some portfolios that will be coming onto the market relatively soon. There are groups raising capital at the moment for this. Am I alone in that view, Christof? Tell me.
No, that's true, of course, but I'm going to be a little bit more like dodging that question, because 2 weeks ago I had my 5-year anniversary of Milestone, and I started in September 2019, and I was looking back 5 years, and I'm like, nobody could have predicted the last 5 years, right? And then so now me standing here trying to predict the future is, and humans in general are very weak when it comes to predicting the future. So I think the major question is, do you believe in the fundamentals of student housing? And this is the overall trend of internationalization, more and more students wanting to get this international experience. And this is a clear yes. So I think the asset class as such will just continue to grow for the next decade. In what direction, of course, we will see.
Okay, now I haven't done this at all so far this year, so let's do it. Which is, by a show of hands, do we believe in the fundamentals of the student housing sector? Do we see it set to grow? I'm going to say yes to that. Okay, good. You obviously can't see that online, but that was, I'd say, 85%, probably something like that. Thanks very much to all of the speakers here, and Julia as well for that research. Really useful to get that, I think. Thanks to everybody here in the room. Thank you as well if you're watching online, and if you are watching this on demand, thank you for watching.